The most widely published book in human history reveals that we are created in the image of God. Throughout our human journey, each encounter is an opportunity to see the shared humanity in ourselves and others. Regardless of one's views on religion, each experience and each story weaves us together towards a common path. A path of transformation, a process of growth and understanding, a recognition that, at our core, we share a common destiny. What does the search for truth really mean in our lives? How can we find a sense of unity in a world so diverse and divided? As we reflect on these questions, we start to uncover a fundamental connection that binds us all beyond our differences. Welcome to Created in the Image of God, Building Vibrant Communities, with our host, Wade Franson. Tonight's episode is Hope Elevation.
Good evening, everyone. It's Wade Franson, Created in the Image of God, episode 220. Had a little panic here. There's a Bible verse which says, hope deferred makes the heart sick. I have a wonderful guest planned. We've been working on this show for, a month or two, perhaps longer. And due to a technical miscommunication glitch, he was in a different studio until I clicked the video intro, but he's backstage right now, and I'm looking forward to introducing him to you. What interested me about Scorpio Lamonte was his focus on identity, and in particular, the identity for those of us who are testosterone-based beings in today's world, which is a topic that has always interested me in terms of finding my way as a spiritual being in this physical body. I'm going to introduce him to the studio right now so that we can dive into this topic. Hey there, Scorpio.
Hello, good evening, Wade. Pleasure to be on with you. Thank you so much.
I'm glad to see the tech is working fine because we didn't have time to do the standard tech check, but there you are. So, Scorpio, as we always do in this show, we like to get your creation story to start out. So I want to know who your parents were, where you were born, the circumstances of that upbringing, as a child, and the forces that shaped you before you took conscious thought to become who you are today. So dive right in.
Man, pleasure. So I'll take you back to probably pick up the story at around the age of 4. And these are the best recollections I have starting school. Shy kid, didn't really like communicating a lot. Allow my brother to speak on behalf of both of us. And then on top of that, you got this weird name that not a lot of people took too kindly of. So quick story on that. So on the first day of school, typically the teachers call all the students by their first and their last name, right? So pretty harmless on his face. But for me, that had my stomach in knots because I knew they're gonna say my name. So basically, they would call my name, and I would shrink, man, in my chair. I slide down, and it's embarrassing. It's having me all upset. And after that happened a couple times, at the age of 7, I realized that I had to figure out a way to hide in plain sight. So I devised a plan, and I actually decided to change my name on that paperwork that comes home to the parent or guardian before school started. And to my surprise, it worked. It worked, right? And they changed my name to Lamont S. Mosley. Matter of fact, that's what's on my high school diploma to this day, because I changed it in that district. But I say all that to say that I was a kid that kind of shied back a little bit, didn't really know, the power of communication at that time. So I learned things the hard way. I was pretty instinctive, so it didn't really take too many times of the hard way to have me figure it out, but I did. But over time, I started to see that if I lean into who I really am, who I really was, and the things that I want to accomplish, I could accomplish things at a greater clip. And that's what allowed me to kind of start to realize the power of really leaning into who you are and being authentic with who you are and being that person that you were purposed to be. So overall, as I started to kind of make it through life, that's kind of been a part of me, seeing it in myself and seeing it in others, how there's an opportunity for us to kind of step out of that herd mentality and step into, being uniquely us. And that's really the journey that I've been on for most of my life. And now I'm at a point where I can kind of share that with others because I think if I was able to lean into that earlier, some of those regrets or some of those things, those lessons that I had to learn the hard way, I probably could have overcome some. Would not have had to deal with some of those if I had kind of approached things in a different manner back then.
So want to go back a little bit and ask a couple of questions about that. So what was the and maybe you know, maybe you don't, but what was the reason your parents gave you that name?
Oh, I know that story well. So that story was so obviously being a kid born in the 70s, raised in the 80s, my parents, my mom back then, they didn't know the gender of the baby before they were born, right? So she had a bet with her friend, Miss Jessie. I never had a chance to meet Miss Jessie, but Miss Jessie said, I'll bet you, Miss Clara, that you're having a boy. Miss Clara wanted her girl because she already had a boy, my older brother Rodney. And Miss Jessie ended up being right. And the bet was if I win the bet, I get to name him. And she chose to name me after my birth sign. So I was supposed to be a Scorpio, but I came about a month early, so I'm a Libra. But they took the Scorpio as the first name, and it was written from there.
Well, I'm glad I asked because that's a hilarious story. And when I think about it, I got to ask you this too. Your focus on identity, it seems to go way, way back with you. I mean, does all that play in? Have you thought about that as to how that plays into your interest and attention to this topic?
100%, 100%. It as I reflected back on my life, there were some things that were pretty consistent throughout. And the name Scorpio, obviously, I buried that name at the age of 7. But full circle, at the age of 24, I had gotten to a point where, I was pretty confident in who I was. I was, making my way into corporate America. I was actually at a telecommunications company as a leader in training. And I was applying for the manager role, but I was at a space where I felt like, you know what? I'm no longer that kid that was shy. I'm pretty confident, and I wanted to reintroduce myself to the world. And as I'm thinking of ways to do that, it occurred to me, like, man, I tested it out a couple times, as an adult, and people would say, man, that's a pretty bad name. I like that name. So that name that was caused me so much anxiety and embarrassment now I felt some respect and admiration for it. So I was like, that's the thing. I'm going to use that name because as an adult, you don't want to be a part of the herd. I got to differentiate myself for that job, for that girl that I like, for, to be the leader of this certain organization or association. I got to be different. And my name allowed me to do that before they ever laid eyes on me, before I ever had a conversation. So I adopted that name, man. And my voice grew, my confidence grew. I think at that point, my purpose grew. You know what I mean? Because I can look back, when I look back over the course of my life, that was a big pivot when I said, I'm Scorpio Lamonte. You know what I mean? That was huge. So it definitely has a lot to do. That's my identity story, right? Burying a name, reclaiming the name, and then that name giving me so much purpose, so much confidence that I can look back and say, that's what launched me into being the person that I am today.
Well, and it is a powerful name. It's an attention-grabbing name, and but you've also got this great origin story around not only your shyness about the name, but how it arose out of a bet. Come on, and then even that, it was like, and yet you were born early, so you defied all expectations, right, from very early on.
You can't make this stuff up. God has a sense of humor, right?
Well, and so speaking of which, I got to share a little story about my name. My name's Wade, and Wade Franson doesn't sound all that unusual, but I've never been able to hide, and I still can't hide because there's no other Wade Franson on the planet. There's probably no other Scorpio Lamonte either, right?
Right.
So if you Google me, you'll find me and only me. There's no one else. And the name doesn't even sound that unusual, but one reason it's unusual is Franson is a typical Swedish name. It's not a hugely common name, but it's instantly recognizable as a Swedish name. There was a Fran Carlson, and his son was named Carl Franson. And they used to do that, right? They used to change every generation in Sweden until they realized that that's confusing. Nobody knows where anybody comes from because we keep changing the identity of the children. And so it's stuck at Franson, right? But when my dad came to the United States, I assume he gave me the name, not my mom. I need to ask him about this because, and I'm going to ask him about this. This is one thing
You
I got
got
to
to know the
clear
history of it. Yeah.
before he leaves this planet, right? But my thought is he gave me the name Wade because it's unpronounceable to all his relatives, and he wanted to establish a new identity, a distinct identity here in the United States. The letter W doesn't even exist in the Swedish language, so they replace it with the V, right? Because it's called a double. It's not a double U; it's a double V.
Right.
We call it W, but in Sweden they would consider it a double V. Anyway, but the Swedish pronunciation of it would be vad, which is very different, right?
Yes.
And so now here's the rub. So my dad kidnaps us as children, smuggles us out of the country, drops us in with 3 sets of aunts and uncles. I don't speak the language. Nobody can pronounce my name. And the word vad in Swedish means was it? Was it? So I got to hear vad, and similar to you, right? I hated it. So, I got to ask my dad about that. So
you got to know the story. Yes, definitely.
Right. So, moving forward, how did you then logically, intellectually start getting interested in this concept of identity, and specifically identity for men and who and what we are in this day and age?
Right. Yeah. I think, to be honest with you, it's just because it was so a part of me. I think, and we didn't move around a lot. We didn't move long distances, but we moved to a couple different places when I was growing up. And being a shy kid, I had to kind of adapt to the environment in those situations. Even 7 miles away from the town I was raised in to the town that we went to high school, and I lived in that town a little bit. It's a different identity that you have with different groups, different cliques of people, right? So for a certain group, you gotta, as an individual kid that's by himself, you gotta be the tough guy, or at least pretend to be tough. You know what I mean? To make sure that you don't get bullied. If you're around, some older folks, you want to try to act a little bit more mature and not so, goofy like the younger kids. So I'm hanging around older kids, so I gotta act like I'm a little bit more mature like them. You know what I mean? So you have all these identities that you're trying to assume based on your environment, and all the while it doesn't feel that comfortable inside, right? So you feel like you're losing who you really are, and as a kid, you don't realize that, but something is off. You feel something. And I can recall those feelings in each of those moments. I can remember that feeling like vividly, how I felt in those situations. So having those experiences, those are never too far from my memory. So as I got older and I started to think about, what my journey has looked like, in my professional career, and then as I transitioned into a full-time entrepreneur, this whole thought of identity and my transition into this space, who am I as I'm showing up, it became more prevalent as an entrepreneur, because as an entrepreneur, it becomes, okay, you're creating this brand or this business. The question becomes, well, what gives you credibility to have that type of business? So now I got to reflect on, what does give me the credibility to have this type of business? What gives me the credibility to be able to speak and pour in the other folks? What accomplishments do I have? Because as you're living it, you're not really quantifying, I did this, and then I did this, and then I accomplished this. You're just kind of living, and you're experiencing, life in its fullness. And if you're successful, that's great as well. But you're not really, well, I didn't, I'll speak for me personally, I didn't quantify it, right? I allowed whatever accomplishments I had, I allowed others to say, you know what, Scorpio did that. I didn't really worry about, tooting my own horn or telling everybody how great I was. But now being in this space, I had to identify it, and I had to share it and talk to people about what qualified me, what gave me the credibility to be able to pour into others in the way that I'm, desiring to do so. So that really just kind of set me down a path. And then as I went down that path, it became, you know what? I'm sure there are a lot of others that have this whole identity issue. Me being a middle-aged man at this crossroads, man, I'm sure there's plenty others that are like me. So as I started to kind of drill down a little bit further into, middle-aged men at a crossroads, really that's one of the biggest things that stand out is the identity. That's probably the top thing, because we all set out on a course to be probably someone different. And then life knocks us around and we end up on a different path altogether, because it's, best for us at that moment, even if it's not who we are, how we identify ourselves, but we'll go for it, because we got to, take care of ourselves or take care of our family or whatever the case may be as far as
Well,
responsibility.
there's that quote, if you don't know where you're going, you'll probably end up somewhere else, right? so,
Mhm.
so, so I gotta ask, is there a particular moment in time today where the identity as a man is maybe more challenging than it might have been in the past? There are stereotypes from the past, and they're not all positive.
Mhm.
Um, but the generation that I grew up in, there was a fairly clear idea of
Mhm.
what your role was, right?
Mhm.
And breadwinner is one easy word, and it's a respectful thing,
Mhm.
right? To take the responsibility to make sure you've put food on the table, and well, guess what? When you marry and your wife is giving birth and then giving birth again, and you've got little children at home, and she's the primary caregiver at that time, the primary educator of these young souls, nurturing them in those early years. You're the one that has to bring in the bacon, and this was traditionally true. And I actually just wrote an article because I had a woman on the show, and I dove into that. I just wrote an article that kind of asked that question from the flip side, where women are expected to kind of have it all, and they
Mhm.
and they get torn and overstretched, and they end up abandoning the joy and the reward in some of the things that were traditionally considered the role of a mother and a
Right.
wife. And they're somehow taught today to feel like there's something wrong with them, or they're inferior if they
Mhm.
just take joy in those things.
Right.
um and what's the equivalent for men then? I mean, is that part of why you think there's a resonance, there's a place, there's a need for you focusing on identity in this way?
Yeah, I think at its core, you know, there's so much happening, around us, and we try to. I think we're misaligning, what's most important or what we should be pursuing. At the end of the day, there's a identity that we're all born with, innately, and that's who God intended for us to be. But I think along the way, we're guided by our environment, the social media, all the things that are pulling us apart in this current time. And we're identifying as those things before we're identifying as, a child of God. That comes way down the list. So we identify on politics, we identify on our race, we identify on the job type we have, we identify on our income. So all these identities we have before the most important identity. And I think that's the thing that kind of allows us to start to drift. And it's not immediately, right? It's not immediately because we have good intentions. We for the most part we know where we should have most of our focus. But over time, as we start to entertain these other identities, that drift starts to happen more and more and more. And if we're doing well, the world tells us, it gives us these pats on the back and say, "Hey, you're awesome. You're a great provider. You're doing well. You're doing everything you should be doing as a man. You're a provider." So, but before you know it, 20 years, 30 years later, you're this middle-aged man and you're still wondering like, man, I got the money, I got the family, but something's missing. What is it? What is it? There's something missing. You know what I mean? And it's like, it's the fact that you're still identifying as all these other things and not really going after your true identity, what means the most to you. And I think that happens for us all. I think, for men, it's just as a man and kind of going through it and experiencing it. It was top of mind for me. So I wanted to try and address it with those that I haven't experienced to pour into um, firsthand. So I think that's the biggest thing that I've seen, and and I think there's underlying reasons behind that. There's a spiritual drift, and you look back, I think, when, you and I are probably similar in age, attendance at church and being around people, of that nature was much more prevalent. Even if it was like in my day, in my neighborhoods where the grandmothers made you go, you know what I mean? It still was top of mind for you because I remember coming down to UCF to go to college, and my mother didn't make us go as much as some of my friends did. And the real reason I entertained going to church on a regular basis was because my best friend, his grandma ingrained in him that you were going to be in church on Sunday. So he ingrained that in us. We were in church on Sunday as college students. And that
Well,
was just
and that's probably one reason why this comment here from Britt, our primary identity, we are souls. Are you able to see that when I put that up on
yeah,
the screen?
I see it. Yeah.
So this she sent that here before you began to get into that. I want to make a comment here because you also mentioned social media, which can take us off in all these directions.
Right.
Comment I want to make is that Britt's commenting from Facebook, therefore she wouldn't have seen the response from at Bavar. I love that in response to her comment because he's posting it from YouTube. So the way this show works, it streams on multiple platforms. We can see all the comments coming in here, but the individual person can only see the comments that
their platform
are on their platform when they're commenting on that platform. So I don't think I've ever explained that to the guests on the show before. So Britt, you weren't ignored at Bavar, and here's another one. Amen, Britt. Right. So we're all on the same page on that one. So I want to now go to our first commercial break, which is a little bit of a video about you and what you do. And there's that kind of authority piece to show, well, this guy does have some chops, some credibility, some reason to be listened to. And when we come back, I'm gonna throw a little bit of a left curve into this identity thing, and see what your reaction is to it. Don't go anywhere. We're going to be right back with more of Scorpio Lamonte on Created in the Image of God.
Scorpio Lamonte is a visionary speaker and transformational coach, helping men rise into the identity and legacy God intended for them. After 25 years leading high-performing teams in corporate America, Scorpio answered a deeper calling, guiding men through moments of transition back to purpose, discipline, and spiritual alignment. As the founder of Hope Elevation and creator of the Hope Protocol, he teaches a powerful truth. Mediocrity is a disease, but hope is a decision. Blending faith, mindset elevation, personal brand, and storytelling, Scorpio helps men see themselves the way God sees them, worthy, capable, and created for impact. Whether coaching individuals, leading organizations, or speaking to men ready for reinvention, his mission is clear: awaken identity, restore confidence, and activate legacy.
Short and to the point, powerful. So in that little video, the narrator said something like, let's see if I get it right. Mediocrity is a disease. Hope is a decision. Is that right?
Yes.
Or was it?
That's
so unpack that for us a little bit.
So I tend to think that when I think about mediocrity, I mentioned earlier this herd mentality. And I think about my life experience, my lived experience as I came through, school age into early adulthood. A lot of my time was spent, trying to blend in I didn't want to crash out, but I also didn't want to stand out. If I could just blend in to the herd and be safe, I'd be fine. But I would see these situations where kids would get bullied. And it was like, man, I'm blending in, so I'm avoiding that. But obviously they weren't able to blend in. So that just kind of tugged at me a little bit. Like that was just kind of a memory that I always kind of took with me. On occasion, I had, it was a funny example. I had this friend getting bullied, and me, out of all people, I wasn't the biggest or the strongest, but I had to fight the bully because the bully was small. You know what I mean? It was a small bully beating up my friend who was bigger than the bully. So I'm like, man, I could take him. So in that situation, I stood in the gap, and we beat up the bully. But seeing those situations was kind of a part of the journey. Knowing that there's a situation where blending in the crowd is not who we were destined to be. Because I think also there's what I would call these glimmers of greatness. And those glimmers of greatness are those opportunities that you have to really show yourself strong. And oftentimes you shrink back in those moments. And again, I'm typically preaching to myself as I'm thinking about it, but I'm sure that happens for others, because there's so many moments in my life where those opportunities presented themselves, but because I was moving with this herd mentality, I denied them. I didn't push forward, and those were the regrets that I would say that I had, as I got older. And as I look back on that, that's where having that chronic mediocrity syndrome had its clutches in me, right? Because there was opportunities to be great, to step outside, not just to survive, but to thrive. And I didn't take advantage of that. And I think that's the thing that, if people can recognize that earlier, especially men, I think there's an opportunity for us to really step into our true greatness at an earlier age in life and really find our purpose earlier. So that's what I mean by chronic mediocrity syndrome, because I've seen it, I've lived it. It's an experience that I know all too well. So that's why this means so much to me, because I know there's many others that are out there that are living under the guise of I'm okay, I'm all right. But you're not here to be okay or all right. You're here to thrive. And that's the plateau, that's the plane that we need to be on.
Awesome. Well, so this sort of curveball or out of left field that I mentioned right before the break that I want to introduce is the issue of race, right? So we're talking about identity, and clearly I'm white, you're colored, Black. So you're talking about identity, but it hasn't come up. You haven't raised that issue, but it's a big issue today. One might say you haven't played the race card, right? So why does that feature prominently? And if not, why not for you? Does that not feature prominently in this issue of identity?
It doesn't feature prominently for me because the whole idea behind my platform is no one's coming to save you. There's no one coming to save you, regardless if you're white, Black, Spanish, whatever. It starts with you, right? So if you look at the resources that are out there, you look at the people that want to assist you and help you, none of those things matter until you actually decide to make a change in your life. So the idea of
the individual choice is the most important factor, and it trumps all the other factors.
Absolutely.
We're not denying that there are other factors,
Mhm.
but by focusing on those other factors, you undermine you in that sense. Since you mentioned disease, you succumb to a disease if you don't realize you have the choice. You were created in the image of God with God-given capacities. Whether you're male or female, he created them male and female, and certainly the colors. Yeah, they're just skin deep.
100%. And it's like at the end of the day, once you make that decision and you start to figure out what you can do about your change, none of those other things matter, because they're going to be there, regardless of how you feel about them, regardless of how you interact. They're going to be there. You know what I mean? So, and I'm not saying don't take that in mind, but that's not the first step. The very first step is you realizing that, you know what, I have to be awakened to the fact that I can't ignore these things that are true of me. I've drifted. I'm not the same. I'm not who I intended to be or who I was purposed to be. So that awakening starts there, right? So before we can make that first step, that awakening has to happen within us, and we can't be ashamed of whatever it is that we've identified as. But once we awaken, then we can start to do the dirty work from there to really kind of turn our life around and move in a positive direction. And again, this doesn't mean that life is going to stop happening. All the things that life throws at you, all those things are going to continue to happen. All I'm saying is, you have to make a decision within yourself to say, hey, I'm identifying as all these things that really aren't in line with who I was purposed to be. I want to peel back the layers of the onion and get back to who I was intended to be, and then pursue life in that manner. And that, like I said, has nothing to do with, all the outside forces or the things that are going on around you in this world. That's simply what's going on in the world in between your two ears. So that's the world that's probably the most important for us, each and every one of us individually.
So when you mentioned that, early on, you were very concerned about not crashing out or standing out.
Mm-hmm.
Did color play a role in that and the herd mentality? And I don't want to overemphasize it, but I also don't want to sweep it under the carpet or not take it into account, especially for perhaps younger people who may not yet have the maturity to really come to the understanding that you have.
Yeah, no, race has always been a part of the journey. It was front and center. So I'm from a small town here in Florida, in North Florida, and it's a really small town. One red light back in the day. We got a couple more at this point, but it was one red light, whites on one side of the track, blacks on the other. Riots in high school, race riots in high school, the Klan protesting or doing whatever they do at a hotel right there on the front strip. So race is always there. I think what I'm more aligned with and concerned with was the issue with identity often is a result of not seeing what's possible. You know what I mean? So being in situations where you don't see the full possibility of who you can be because no one looks like you that's having that type of success. That's a part of what causes these identity issues as well. So
that would impact hope. That would impact hope, right? If you're not seeing a lot of examples, It might be harder to have hope, easier to lose hope. But the faith chapter, Hebrews chapter 6, literally says, faith is the evidence of things not seen.
Yeah.
The substance, or it's the substance of faith is the evidence of things not seen, the substance of things hoped for. So, so you can't see it. You don't really have any reason to hope for it. So, so from that perspective, it doesn't matter if you do or don't see people like you, because ultimately, if your faith is tested, if it's really true faith, none of that matters. It's helpful.
If you're mature enough.
I don't need to diminish it. I'm not saying that we should in any way take away, anything that can encourage people, but faith is the evidence of things not seen, the substance of things hoped for. That's the definition from the Bible.
100% true. If you're mature enough to internalize that and walk with that in mind, I think that's pretty difficult in a lot of cases, especially, for those that may not be at that level of maturity in Christ. And I would say, as a kid, I wasn't there, so that wouldn't have been a factor to help me see beyond that. My point is this: is that there's opportunity for us to see things or put ourselves in a better position to achieve if we make certain decisions that allow us to achieve greater results. And what I mean by that is, at the end of the day, we make 35,000 decisions a day. And those decisions are either giving us life or they to our detriment. So if I choose to change 20, 50, 200, 300 of those, and that number escalates over time, my results are going to get better, a little bit better, a little bit better, because I play a part in my existence.
That's a lot of power. That many choices per day is a lot of power, or a lot of baggage, a lot of what's that word? Entropy or inertia, a lot of inertia or a lot of power.
100%. I was talking to some kids about 2 weeks ago, and we were talking about the power of their decisions. And we were talking about, obviously, in one day is 35,000, in a week is 2,500, in a month, I'm sorry, 2,500 in a week. So it's over 120 million in 10 years. And I was like, someone that's 10 years older than you, right? And I bet when you look at some people, you can say, man, they made some bad decisions, or man, they made some good decisions, right? So those decisions are compounding. And that's why, like I said, again, all these issues happening in the world, race, economy, all these things they've always been issues. But if we're focused on how do I change my identity to get back to who I was purposed to be and move myself forward in that regard, it starts with me. It starts with me making better decisions, using the power of those decisions to give myself the momentum I need to move myself forward. And that's the thing I think is what's most important and what's missed by most of us, because I can say without a shadow of a doubt, I didn't realize the power of my decisions. Like, there is true power there. And if I use those appropriately, I can move myself forward, and that's what takes you into once I have the identity that I have, that I'm desiring to now move forward with. How do I move forward with that? I move forward with discipline by making the right decisions.
And then once we are mature enough to implement that faith, make those choices, improve on those choices, ultimately the choices then hopefully lead to serving others, right? And this is where that example can come back into play, right? Because Jesus said, and I focused a lot on this in my own journey and transition, to realize what is it that Jesus is really looking for? What is it that God is really looking for? Jesus gave a sign of how we will know who his true followers are. And it's John 13:35. By this shall all men know that you are my disciples. This is the outward visible sign that everyone will know, that you love one another. So there's the example, there's the hope that can be given to others when we turn around and we look for those who need help, who need encouragement, who need assistance, and we're showing love to them. And by that, we're fulfilling the sign of being a follower of Jesus. And we're also giving other people hope, which they need. But to your point, and I agree with this 100%, at the individual level, it doesn't matter what somebody else does or doesn't do for you. You stand and fall alone before God.
Right. We're on
And
this journey.
Jesus is very clear on that. He says, if Job were here, right, he wouldn't save anybody but himself, right? If Elijah were here, he wouldn't save anybody but himself, right? It's at the individual level. But that doesn't mean we don't do everything we can to give people hope, to give them encouragement, because God can use us to give that person what they need.
100%. And I think, as we are kind of turning our life in a different direction and moving in that direction based on the identity that we're pursuing, others are always watching, right? Be it, loved ones, family members, co-workers, people in the community. People are always watching, right? So you're an inspiration, whether you believe it or not. So as I think about the framework that I tend to share, which is the Hope Protocol, one aspect of that is really the legacy aspect of it. And that legacy aspect of it is, how do you make a life out of the path that you've chosen to take, to live with this identity that you've reclaimed. And then you also pour into others who may have similar concerns or maybe on a similar path that you come from, to be able to share your experience with what it takes to be able to turn your life in a positive direction, or in a direction that is more in alignment with your purpose. Because that's the thing. I think, at the end of the day, we obviously are here to be able to spread the good news, but also to be disciples and make discipleship, so there's that aspect of it too. We're not on this journey only for ourselves. We want to make sure that others see, the way as well. So being able to pour into others by what we do, how we do it, I think is a critical part of it. I know it is for me, because now that and that's the whole idea of it, right? Now that I've had this journey, and I can look back and say, man, throughout my life, these were the experiences that have shaped me. Identity has played a huge role in it. Who else is kind of dealing with something of this nature? Who else is kind of struggling in this regard? Who else can I pour into? You know what I mean? So I think that's the bigger part of it as well, because we're here to try to change lives, save souls, and if we're not doing that, then what are we doing it for?
Yeah, I want to close up this segment with going back to the race well one more time. Just to read a quote. This is from a religious leader by the name of Abdul Baha. He's the son of Baha'u'llah, who is the founder of the Baha'i faith. He's actually from Persia, and he and his father were exiled, and they ended up in Akka, which is today in the northern part of Israel. When they were exiled there, it was under the Ottoman Empire, and it was a prison city. But he actually visited the United States in like 1912, I believe it was. And of course, coming from that part of the world, they didn't have the same kind of situation that we had here. And of course, at that time, you still had extreme segregation, extreme racism in 1912. And he made the following comment about America. I'd just like to read this passage and get your take on it. One of the important questions which affect the unity and the solidarity of mankind is the fellowship and equality of the white and colored races. Between these two races, certain points of agreement and points of distinction exist, which warrant just and mutual consideration. The points of contact are many, for in the material or physical plane of being, both are constituted alike and exist under the same law of growth and bodily development. Furthermore, both live and move in the plane of the senses and are endowed with human intelligence. In other words, we're both human, right? Then he says, there are many other mutual qualifications. In this country, the United States of America, patriotism is common to both races. I think that's an astounding comment from somebody from Persia describing America in 1912. But there was a patriotism, both races identified themselves as American and were patriotic about being in this country. All have equal rights to citizenship, even at that time after the Civil War. That changed and became, they speak one language and receive the blessings of the same civilization and follow the precepts of the same religion. Because large majority of white and black people were all Christian back then in 1912. In fact, numerous points of partnership and agreement exist between the two races, whereas the one point of distinction is that of color. It's kind of a long-winded way of saying the only difference, he goes through the only difference is color. Shall this, the least of all distinctions, be allowed to separate you as races and individuals? I found this quote to be absolutely astounding from over 100 years ago, to say, look, you're both the same. You live in the same country. You call yourselves American. You have the same citizen. You're patriot. You have the blessings of this civilization, but you have a different color. You allow that? Are you going to allow that to separate you? And yet we haven't. We still today, right? There's so much talk about this. One last comment from you on this topic in terms of identity and the work that you do, especially for men. What can we do about this? What do we need to do to finally fix this?
That's a tough one. And that's why I think for me it's so important to focus on my own flaws, focus on my own shortcomings. And I think if we did more of that, it would allow us to be more accepting of each other's shortcomings. Because right now, and for quite some time, it's always been them.
Yeah, us and them. A label put on the other side. Fine. It's that old Dr. Seuss thing about this. What are the sneetches? Do you know that thing? Some of them have a star and some of them don't have a star on them.
Oh yeah. And that's the thing. I think more than anything, when we think about what, and it's said so often, right? We have more in common than we have that is different about us. But for whatever reason, we can't seem to focus on that. But I think it goes back to the individuals. The individuals, most of us are so focused on the issues and, you know, the splinter in the other person's eye. We got this pole in our own eye. You know what I mean? And we just can't get past that. You know what I mean? And I think if you could, because when you turn that focus inward and you start to look at your own flaws, you start to figure out like, man, what can I be better at? How can I approach life differently so that I can get to a better place in life or a better plane in life? You have to understand that others are having those same issues. And then
Right.
that commonality allows you to be more accepting of those issues because you're dealing with it yourself. It's just the fact that I think we deny any shortcomings that we have and we just don't own them. And the sad part about it is probably, you know, more the Christians than anything, or the people that promote themselves as Christians that are like that because they don't own their own flaws, their own issues. It's always them. That person is a heathen and sinning and not right in God's eye. If you look at yourself, man, you got a lot of baggage yourself.
I've thought so much about that exact concept over the total course of my life because I was a minister, right? And I was involved in a church that very much we did focus on ourselves a lot. I don't want to exaggerate or overemphasize this because we really did go to the Bible and what you just said, you know, we constantly got sermons on, you know, take the beam out of your own eye before worrying about the splinter of someone else. And the mind of Jesus is to esteem others better than yourselves. So we tried and tried and tried. But at the same time, we had all this special knowledge and special understanding, right? That
Mhm.
because of all this, we knew in one sense we were supposed to be better, right? Because if God is with us, if Jesus is in us, if the Holy Spirit is in us,
Mhm.
empowering us, you want that to be in evident. You want others to see it, right?
Right,
So
right.
therefore, you have to be performing in some way at a superior level to those that don't. You follow me? And
Right.
so you have this almost schizophrenic desire to be better than others. You follow me? Because
Mhm.
you should be with all the richness that you have,
Mhm.
the knowledge, the Holy Spirit, you know, everything should make you a better person.
But
But
if it's all an act,
one way to get there, one way to sort of short circuit the whole thing is to put others down to make yourselves feel better about yourself. And I think this is one reason why religions tend to do that because it's
mhm,
this almost cognitively dissonant schizophrenia where with all the blessings and the richness we have to show forth the power of God, the grace of God. You know, sure, he calls the weak and foolish, but he doesn't intend them to stay that way. He calls the weak and foolish to confound the mighty, it says, because we should be wiser than those who don't have this wisdom. You follow me? Do you understand what I'm saying?
but it's so like, but if it's not true and it's not who you are,
Yeah.
and we talk about God being all knowing, omnipotent, like why? It's an act. That's the part I just don't understand. It's an act. Yes, all that is true, and you're supposed to. But if that's not who you are authentically, then it's a house of cards. What are we doing? And that's my point. Like, if I look inward and it's like, yes, I have all this knowledge and I understand who I should be, but I'm not. I'm not that person. Man, I'm not that person. Okay, how about we do the work to be that person? And it's not going to happen overnight. It may not happen in a decade, but the progress, the momentum going in that direction is going to be well worth it because you're authentic and you're sincere. And who knows, when that day comes, you may just find yourself living in glory. Because maybe not if you're living like that. I don't know.
Well,
For me,
maybe if you're actually focused on doing the work and you then know how hard it really is, and you also know how much you're falling short, you're getting better every day, but you are also gaining humility at the same time.
100%, 100%. You have to. That's the only way. That's the only way I see it. And you have to fall in love with that work. It's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be always be fun. but it's the right thing to do. Like, we can never go wrong doing right. And for me, that's why this means so much, because, okay, now I'm identifying in this way, here's the work it takes. I'm on the right track. Not that I'm going to be perfect, not that I'm not going to make mistakes, but I'm really trying. I'm really leaning into this. And these micro habits, these micro behaviors make it a little bit easier, because I think the mistake we make is we got to make these wholesale changes. Oh man, I got to stop doing this in order to be in line with God and do the thing. No. It's micro habits, micro behaviors. Spoon feed yourself and move yourself in the right direction. Before you know it, you'll be doing a lot of great things, and you'll start making progress. But I think that's the biggest issue, man. We want wholesale changes. We're in a microwave generation.
And the other thing is we are strongly warned against comparing ourselves to other people, right? We are charged by divine authority to not compare ourselves with other people, but to compare ourselves against the word of God.
But that's all social media does for us all day, every day. It's comparing us. Or like, this is what you should be. You should be just like this person. Even if it's not real, we're seeing all these things that
And then
we should
the AI enhanced selfies that present
it. That's the thing now, right? The last couple of weeks. And I refuse to do it because I didn't want to be a part of it. Like, I'm not doing that.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to go to a quick break. When we come back, we want to ask, okay, so where are you growing next? Where's all this taking you? And maybe an example or two of the kind of transformation that you're seeing in the work you're doing. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with more of Scorpio Lamonte on Created in the Image of God.
What can you do to sharpen your vision of the economy beyond your wildest imagination? Introducing Divine Economy Model by Bruce Kerber, a book that escorts you through a very human way of building subjective models. These models are visual, logical, and conceptual. They acknowledge the complementary nature of human intellect and spirituality in all human action. Will you be able to grasp these economic models? Absolutely. You will feel as if you are building the models yourself. They fit into your imagination every step of the way, making logical sense while surprising you with new insights. To say that you've never experienced anything like this before is an understatement. Since when have you encountered a qualitative model of the economy that captures purposeful, spiritual, human action? You will suddenly recognize how intimately connected we are and how the economy empowers us as individuals and fulfills our social nature. The four models presented in this book, macroeconomics, microeconomics, ethical economics, and economic justice, are cohesively bound together. Divine Economy Model by Bruce Kerber. Get your copy now at Amazon.
And just to add a little plug to that book, we've had Bruce Kerber on the show before. His basic economic unit is the individual who has God-given gifts and capabilities and creative power to create value, right? And each of us generating and creating value derived from a spiritual source is how he builds it. It's really quite fascinating. But we're back in the studio with Scorpio Lamonte. So right before the break, we were wrapping up the segment on choices and outward circumstances, the cards the world deals us, how we have to deal with them, and how we compare ourselves to a divine standard and make choices with the benefit of wisdom derived from holy writings, also from the Spirit of God and the power that's created within us. So tell us now a little bit more about how you're doing that, or how you've done that, maybe a couple of examples, and where you're going next with your work and your purpose and your focus.
Yeah, so I'm actually stepping into a couple spaces right now. I'm working with some of the schools, local schools in my local district. So we're pouring into a lot of the kids. And the reason that came about is because that was kind of low-hanging fruit. A lot of the relationships that I had allowed me to be able to connect there. So exciting to be able to proactively step into the spaces of kids and pour into them, especially this whole notion of identity. Because
does it take a special kind of school to invite you in versus other kind of approaches to the challenges that are being faced by children?
So right now, I'm actually working with a number of the Title I schools. So these are schools that have a greater amount of students that are below the poverty line. So they have, additional needs that, other schools may not have when it comes to retention, parent engagement, things of that nature, staffing, so on and so forth. So being able to kind of step in and help in regards to those situations has been an opportunity that I've been able to take part in. So I'm
Well,
excited about
remind me before I forget. We've also had Joseph Atman on the show a couple of times.
it.
He's the founder of Middle Tree, which has some state contracts out in California, Arizona, um, taking also assisting in through the public school
Mhm.
system with individualized education. So I want to connect the two of you. Just mental note. But anyway, go on.
No, so it's actually been pretty refreshing to see some of the opportunities to align with some of the parents. Obviously, there's a lot of concerns with to support some of the kids or may not have with schools that don't have s- the level of staff and the number of staff to be able to help with the students in those districts. So being able to step in and kind of stand in the gap with engaging with some of the parents and then other workshops and programs that we're trying to design specifically for each school has been a pretty engaging work. Right now, I'm in the phase where I'm learning what their concerns are, and then we'll try to pull together a customized approach to addressing some of those needs based on the funding that the Title I provides and how it kind of works on behalf of the schools. So that's one approach. The other thing I've been really walking closer with is my church. My church is giving me some opportunities to pour into some of the men. We have a men's ministry, so I had a really great time being one of the keynote speakers for our men's breakfast last month. Typically, that's a opportunity reserved for some of the pastors, so I was able to step in and offer that, and really got a lot of great feedback. And what I'm looking to do is as I build out my coaching, is start to find folks that I can connect with, and then kind of walk them through my program to be able to pour into them over a period of time to really have an impact on their lives. So starting to get some really good excitement around that, and starting some prospects are starting to come about for me. So those are kind of the segments I'm working on. I also had a recent opportunity to work with the local chamber, so working with them on possibly doing some leadership classes. Because I'm a firm believer that who we show up as in our work life, in our personal life, to the community, that person is the same person, right? It shouldn't be a different face that
Right.
everybody sees. That person is the same person. So at the end of the day, if we're working on who we are and what we're about and how we show up and represent ourselves, that should impact every aspect of our life. And that's why when I think about my brand, motivational speaking, coaching, mentoring, personal styling, inside, outside, presence, it's how you show up every single day. And that's really exciting for me to be able to help people with that transformation.
So in the little video, there was a website. I'm going to just go ahead and type it in. It'll go out to all channels here. How do people contact you or reach out to you?
That website landing page has all my contact information and all the different services
Oh,
that we offer when it comes to
What's
speaking.
what's that website name?
It's meet.scorpiolamont.com.
Meet.scorpio.lamont.
No, scorpiolamont.com.
Okay, no dot.
Meet.scorpiolamont.com. Yeah.
All right. Let's make
Yeah,
sure I
and there
got
you're
that
welcome. Go
right.
ahead.
Is that it right there?
No E on the end.
Oops. Darn it. One more time. There we go. Let's just leave that up on the screen here for a moment.
There we go.
Awesome. And so that's where they can find your contact information. I'm sure you've got like a way to quickly reach out to you.
Yes.
And it's been just a joy and a pleasure having you on the show. I'd like to spend a little more time we're doing quite well here on the show, getting some really fascinating guests, and sort of moving up that, let's call it the authority meter, in terms of people believing, hey, this person has something meaningful and important to say. The kind of approach that you take would be useful to me, and of course anyone else that feels that need or that desire. What would you like to leave the men with who are tuning in today?
I think, at the end of the day, as I've said a few times, it starts within, right? And I heard this quotable the other day, and it resonated with me because it really starts with our thoughts, right? So it said, watch your thoughts, they become your words. Watch your words, they become your actions. Watch your actions, they become your habits. Watch your habits, they become your character. Watch your character, it becomes your destiny. So I think living with something like that in mind, understanding the power of your decisions, the power of your thoughts, really is what can turn our life around and put us on the right track, or it can keep us where we are. So understand the power of your thoughts, the power of your decisions. And if you look at that the right way, if you align that with your purpose, I think we can all become the individuals that we are destined to be, and truly have an impact, not just for you, your family, your community, but for the world.
One last comment from the audience. Puddle jump. Yeah, this has been fun. Please have Scorpio back. Well, we're out of time. It went really super fast, and I would love to have you back. I've just got one more thing to tell the audience, which is you are created in the image of God, and God loves his creation. So we've just got one more thing, and that's the sneak peek. Scorpio, if you want to hang out and chat briefly afterwards, please feel free to do so. If you've got to run, please feel free to do so, but we'll run the sneak peek and then end the show. Any final last words to give you the last word here?
No, man, God is good. God is good. And we're thankful for all his blessings. So thank you guys for having me. It's been a complete pleasure. And yes, that hour went a bit too fast. So I'd love to come back.
Well, and I'm glad it worked out. Like I said at the beginning, literally he entered the studio like as I was clicking play on the, and faith and hope worked out for us tonight. So
absolutely.
We'll see everyone again soon. Here's the sneak peek for next week. And it's kind of a continuation on the theme in a way, but from a completely different perspective. And I know you're going to love it. So I hope to see you all here next week.
Awesome.
Hey everyone, it's Wade Franson back with another sneak peek. It's Valentine's week this coming week, and this is episode 222 airing Tuesday night, February 17th at 8 p.m. I have, for Valentine's week, a lovely lady in the studio, Marlena Graves, who has a PhD and has done doctoral research on culture, immigration, race, and poverty. She draws on a rich mix of pastoral and academic experience and weaves storytelling into timeless wisdom with her book, The Way Up is Down. Welcome to the studio, Marlena.
Thank you. It's so good to be here, Wade.
Well, we've been working on getting this show recorded and prepared here for some time. And I'm really excited because today in America, we have this polarized culture of sides blaming each other. And a lot of it is over the issues that you address, but you address them in a unique way given your education and experience. Can you unpack this for us in a soundbite? I know that's just to sort of tease people into why they need to come and listen to the whole story.
Well, the question's perfect because I'm writing about currently and thinking about the not just Zulu, but Southern African concept of Ubuntu, which is summarized, I am because we are. And the fact that everything is interrelated. when Martin Luther King Jr. gave his commencement speech at Oberlin College in 1965, he said something he said something similar, and I'm pretty sure he knew of that concept. And I think, and I'm only speaking from the United States because that's my experience, including Puerto Rico, but there are a lot of people in the United States, a lot of Christians, especially white evangelical Christians, that do not understand that we're all interrelated and that my well-being is tied to yours and everyone else's. It's weird that people think, to me, it's weird that they think you have to be just like them and think like them and have the same kind of life as them for them to seek your flourishing. It doesn't make sense. And to me, it's, I would say, godless, not divine. And so those subjects about poverty and immigration and basically everything that's blown up here in American culture, as you alluded to, those are really points where you can see that, where oftentimes I think people, not everyone, but there's a lot of people that if they don't know someone in a particular situation, they feel like they can somehow opt out of loving them. And, you know, as a Christian, I like, Jesus did not say, you know, pick which neighbor you want to love. Jesus said, love all of your neighbors without exception, that everyone should flourish without exception, no matter what they believe or who they are. And so I think right now in the United States is we are seeing the fruit of bad theology and Christian practice that I don't believe is the way of Jesus. And the gap is that people don't understand that their neighbors include people they might consider their enemies, as Jesus taught in Matthew 5 on the Sermon on the Mount, and people who are not like them. We cannot have selective compassion.
Well, so well said. And, you know, it's kind of the applying of labels to people as an excuse to somehow not do what Jesus told us to do. I love that you bring in the Ubuntu word. I want to share that I just interviewed earlier today for a different show, a Greek scientist working on medical bioethics at Harvard. And we talked about Socrates and Plato, and I shared with him, Plato has this term about man, which is often translated that man is a political animal, which, you know, obviously raises all the negativity, but a better translation would be man is a social creature, right? So depending on whether you think man is a political animal or a social creature, Plato was trying to get at the fact of what you're saying is that we are all one and we need each other, and we can learn to practice these divine teachings in community, right? And that community, to your point, includes people outside our little tiny traditional tribal community. So how do you reach people to unpack that and help them see that their sort of narrow-mindedness needs to be expanded?
Yeah, I think, as you know, I think relationships important because, as you said earlier, labels, people will just dismiss me for saying, in the United States at least, for saying this or so, whatever my language. If I don't speak the language of that tribe or the buzzword, they could tell who's in and who's out. And so, you know, there are people that, and because of algorithms on social media, that never hear what I say or read my stuff. But I continue to keep reaching out to people that are different than me. I try not to isolate myself in situations where I'm around people that think exactly as I do politically or religiously, maybe people that are Christians or not Christians, because I know there's goodness in all sorts of different kinds of people. And I try to, and I think this is what Jesus did, and it can be very hard, especially if someone is acting as your enemy, like is abusing you or hurting you. I don't want anyone to put themselves in an abusive situation, but I keep trying to reach out and keep myself open to people because I just read something last night that bothered me about one kind of political group, there are people saying, oh, you finally came around to see what we've been saying forever, too little, too late. And I'm of the mentality, yes, I would have wished that someone would have came around earlier to seeing what I believe to be the truth. But I kind of think of, well, better late than never, because there's some hope. So I try to hold out hope in myself. If I have a visceral reaction to someone or their behavior because I feel like they're hurting someone else, usually it's because they're hurting or oppressing someone else. That's when I get really upset. I'm like, I try to remember that they are a human being, and there's probably lots of goodness that I don't see. And I also remember that I wasn't where I am now. I wasn't there 20 years ago. There needs to be room for growth. And I feel like in our current, at least the social media culture, if you don't got it right now, then you're going to get run over by whatever side you're at. There's no room for nuance or for people going on a journey. And so I try to remind myself of that frequently so that I can keep reaching out to people. And I think the more that people can know me personally, which is hard, right? But if people can know me personally, I think they'll see that, I'm not their enemy, that I do want them to flourish too.
Yeah, I mean, I love that you brought up too little, too late, because why not say, thanks for taking a step in my direction, let's talk.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that I think you have a good point of view, but I mean, I do think you have the right point of view, but I think some people are like, it's your fault that we're in this situation. You were so stupid and closed-minded. I can't forgive you, or I can't deal with you, so you deserve all the bad consequences. But to return back to Ubuntu, my well-being is tied to the well-being of those people that aren't necessarily like me. And again, I'm not saying to put ourselves in physical or emotional or spiritual danger. I'm, within bounds, but we are to keep, I don't know, for lack of a better word in politics, trying to work across the aisle or across the denomination or religion to keep seeing the humanity in people, and maybe be willing to say, there's some things that I don't understand. I don't understand, but I'm still going to seek your flourishing.
Amen to that. So there you have a sneak peek into what we will be talking about this coming Tuesday night, 8 p.m. Central, with Marlena Graves on Created in the Image of God on February 17th. We'll see you there.